there have been a series of recent fires in LA, and I think those fires are the past, and I think they're the future. And the way they're the past is that the Los Angeles region, that area burns. In fact, the Western United States burns. It's what it does. Most of the Western United States and many other places in the world are fire dependent communities. There are types of trees who, like lodgepole pines, not in LA, but in the West, who require fire to pop their cones open. And there are beetles who live who who have smoke and heat detectors on their heads, and they fly toward the fires because when the fires, and then they stop when it's too hot, and then when it cools down enough, they fly in to eat the soft wood that's been burned. And there are woodpeckers, black-backed woodpeckers. And can you guess why they're black, why their backs are black? It's because they're camouflaged on scarred trunks. They evolved over thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years in these communities with fire. And I'm going to stop here and say, I feel very bad for the people who have lost their homes, their lives, their pets, their horses, their sheep. And the same is true the same is exactly true when I hear about the same tragedy happening to people in floods or hurricanes. And the thing is, if you build in a flood zone, you're going to get flooded at some point. And if you build in a fire zone, there's going to be a fire. And if you build in an earthquake zone, it's going to be an earthquake. And California burns. It's what it does. It's what it's always done. So that's the way it's the past. And and there are things people can do individually to try to mitigate their own danger. Um, the stuff defensible space and using materials that don't burn, etc. But it doesn't alter the fact that nature always bats last. And if you build in a fire zone, expect at some point to get burned. I live in it'd be like if you live next to the ocean, right next to the ocean, you should expect that your paint is going to go bad every couple of years because of the salt. It's just forces of nature. As Bill McKibben is fond of saying, you can't argue with physics. And so that's how it's the past. And the way it's the future is that in the past, what would happen is that chaparral would burn and some oaks would burn and wood burns. And that's sure you can die of smoke inhalation, but it's not the same thing as breathing in burned polyvinyl chloride. And the materials of which the houses were made is highly toxic. And that a future of toxic smoke and toxins on the ground that are then rained in when the rains eventually come. That's the future. And the past, we've been lied to by the Forest Service, et cetera, that actually, for the most part, yes, fires will kill trees often, but it don't always even kill trees. But they don't kill a lot of animals. Kill a few, really unlucky ones. But for the most part, most fires, even big fires, move fairly slowly. And it's interesting that insects will know, and ground dwelling creatures will know to get just a couple inches under the ground. And then the fire passes over and then they come up. And birds, you'll notice that birds don't nest during fire season. So the birds can fly away from their nests and they don't really have to worry about it. And the reason is because that's how evolution works, that if they nested during burning season, their babies would die. And for the most part, most fires move pretty slowly in general, and most animals can basically amble away. And the thing is, you can't if you're in a fence. And so 500 years ago, if there would have been a fire like this, the humans would have walked away from their fairly small dwellings that were capable of being rebuilt in an afternoon or a day. And the bears would have ambled away. Everybody would have ambled away who could, or they would have crawled under, or they would have flown away. And the actual loss of life would have been fairly small. And again, it was a part of life. This is what you know. If you have lived in Los Angeles for 10,000 years, you know that Los Angeles burns. That's what it does. And that's the past. And the future is what we saw, which is people no longer able, well, first off, we have horses and sheep and cattle enclosed, so not able to run away. We have dogs and cats in houses who can't run away, in fences who can't run away. So we have these enclosures that make it so they die when they might not have. And we also have humans who can't walk away because that's not how it works anymore. And they drive, and we have highways that don't support the number of people, and they get stuck, and then they end up walking as they would have 500 years ago. And we have bulldozers who go down the highways, bulldozing cars that are abandoned out of the way. And that's the future. And another thing that we have is we've heard a lot about hydrants running out of water, and I don't know the particulars of this particular case, if it was specifically poor planning, if it was corruption, if it was, I don't know. I've heard all sorts of rumors, and that's not the important thing. The important thing is it's a desert. And this is a metaphor for the larger picture of cities being bloated centers of consumption, stealing resources from the countryside, which is what Los Angeles has been doing forever. We all know the stories of the theft of water for the orange groves. We all see Chinatown, and we know that again, and we also know this is what cities do. They all steal everything from the surrounding countryside. And these days, I've seen a lot of people blaming Delta smelt for the lack of water. And Delta smelt are a small fish who live in the Sacramento River Delta, and they have been completely hammered by water theft. And the water theft has been for almonds, it's been for wine, it's been for cities. And you know what? I don't actually care what it's for. The bottom line is that the Delta smelt have been hammered, and they're going to continue to get hammered because cities are more important than life. Cities are more important than life on the planet. And because there has to be a scapegoat, and nature's always at the bottom. That's the future. The future is Delta smelt today and somebody else tomorrow, until there's nothing left. And it all comes from not respecting the fact that nature exists in the place that you have chosen to live. And that, and also that humans were never meant to live in concrete and with polyvinyl chloride and in numbers this large, concentrated this densely. And we constantly express surprise when people living in a hurricane zone run into a hurricane, and when people living in a fire zone run into a fire. Nature exists, it's real. And if one of the things, if I could condense all of my work into one phrase that might be would be physical reality is always more important than the social systems we construct upon it. And if you live in the West, you live in a fire dependent region. That is the independent variable. How we live there is the dependent variable. And it is incumbent upon us to make our dependent variable relevant to the independent variable upon which our life is founded.